A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook, written by Jane. Prologue. 8 years ago, the world was different. It was hers. Her scent was summer rain and wildflowers, a heady mix that calmed the beast raging in my chest. Elara, my Omega. Her laughter was the only music my soul ever craved, and her touch was the only peace I had ever known. We were a secret whispered on the wind, a prince and his fated mate, hidden away in the ancient woods of the royal lands. That night, the moon was a perfect silver coin in the dark velvet sky. "I will never leave you," I murmured into her hair, my voice thick with a promise that was more sacred than any law. My wolf, my very essence, preened under her soft sigh. "When I am king, you will be my queen, not for politics, not for duty, but because you are the other half of my soul." She looked up at me, her eyes deep pools of trust. "Theron." Before the words left her lips, my mother, the queen, appeared. Not in person, never in person. Her presence was a chill that stole the warmth from the air, a phantom whisper laced with poison and dark magic. "She will be your undoing," the voice hissed in my mind, a serpent coiling around my thoughts. "An Omega cannot rule. She is a weakness, a distraction. Forget her." "No," I grunted, my head throbbing. My wolf snarled, fighting a battle I couldn't see. Forget. The word was a hook, a barb of ice sinking into my memory. I looked at Elara, and for a terrifying second, her face was a blur. The scent of wildflowers turned acrid, like smoke. Her touch felt strange, unfamiliar. What followed was a nightmare of confusion. My own instincts turned on me, my love twisting into a cold, unfamiliar anger. Who was this woman? Why did my heart ache for a face I suddenly couldn't place? Deep down, she knew the truth was slipping away. Her eyes filled with a terror that I, in my cursed haze, mistook for betrayal. And just like that, everything changed. I pushed her away. The memory shattered, leaving only dust and a cold, empty throne where my heart used to be.
"Mama, did Papa teach you how to make the flowers grow?" The question was so innocent, so pure, and it was a blade that slid right between my ribs, twisting with 8 years of secrets. I looked down at my son, Leo, his small hands patting the dark soil beside mine. His eyes, the exact shade of a summer sky, were wide with curiosity. "They are his father's eyes," a treacherous voice whispered in my mind. I forced a smile. "He did, sweet boy. Your papa was very good with his hands." A truth, but not the truth. My late husband, a kind and simple carpenter, had been good with his hands. But he hadn't been Leo's father. My chest ached with a familiar, hollow pain. Truth be told, sometimes the lie felt so real, so worn in, I almost believed it myself. We had a quiet life here in Oakhaven, a simple one. And for a long time, that was enough. It had to be. Moments later, a long shadow fell over our small garden patch. Old Man Hemlock, the village elder, stood there, his face etched with worry. In fact, his brow was furrowed so deeply it looked like a canyon. He held a piece of parchment, the royal seal a blood-red blot at the bottom. "A new decree from the king, Elara." His voice was gravelly. "Another tax." My heart skipped. A beat later, it hammered against my ribs. Another one? We were already stretched so thin we were transparent. I took the parchment, my fingers trembling slightly. The words were cold, sharp, demanding. They spoke of a war on the northern border, of a kingdom's needs, but all I could see was the food being snatched from my son's mouth. All I could feel was the icy grip of the man who wrote them, a man I once loved, King Theron, the Iron King, the boy who promised me forever, had become a tyrant who would starve us without a second thought. Deep down, she knew the truth. This peaceful life was an illusion, a house of cards built on a cracked foundation, and the wind from the capital was starting to blow. The whispers in the village were as sharp and cold as the winter wind. The Iron King bleeds us dry. Hasn't been right since the Queen died. Another war. For what? The words followed me as I walked to the pawn shop. The last of my meager savings already gone to my husband's burial. The new tax wasn't just a burden. It was a death sentence. To make things worse, a letter had arrived from my late husband's family that morning. Their words a polite but firm dismissal. You are on your own. So I stood before the grimy shop window, my reflection a pale, thin ghost I barely recognized. In my hand was the only thing of value I had left, a small silver locket. It wasn't fancy, but it was heavy. Heavy with the memory of a moonlit night and a whispered promise. You will be my queen. What a fool I had been. What have you got? The pawnbroker grunted, his eyes scanning me with disinterest. My voice trembled as I placed the locket on the counter. It's silver. He picked it up, his dirty thumb smudging the surface. He tested it, weighed it. It's worth little. Please. The word was a breath, a prayer. My son, he needs food. He gave me a few coins. Not enough, not nearly enough. But it was something. As I left the shop, the empty space in my pocket felt colder than the locket ever had. It was the severing of the last tie, the final admission that the boy who gave it to me was well and truly dead. In his place was a monster. That night, I held the few coins in my hand, the metal biting into my skin. Maybe it was fate that I had so little left of that life. It made it easier to hate him. It made the rage a warm blanket against the encroaching cold of despair. Because of that, I almost missed the faint shimmer in Leo's cup of water, a tiny distortion that vanished as soon as I looked directly at it. I dismissed it as a trick of the candlelight, my mind too weary to chase another shadow. A mistake that would soon haunt me. The cold came first, a bitter, creeping chill that seeped through the cracks in our tiny cottage and settled deep in our bones. Then came the fever. I woke to the sound of Leo's soft, pained whimpers. His forehead burned beneath my hand, a terrifying heat that had nothing to do with our dwindling fire. His cheeks were flushed a dangerous red, and his breaths came in shallow, ragged gasps. "Mama," he whispered, his sky-blue eyes glassy with sickness. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my heart. Without thinking, I wrapped him in every blanket we owned, my own body trembling. I ran to the village healer, my bare feet numb against the frozen earth. The healer, a woman with kind eyes and weary lines, did what she could. She brewed herbs that filled the cottage with a pungent, earthy smell. She murmured soothing words. But by the time the moon was high again, her expression was grim. "This is no common fever, Elara." Her voice was low, a death knell in the quiet room. "It's the lung rot. It moves fast. The herbs will not be enough." I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. What? What does he need? A city remedy, a potent tincture made by the alchemists in the capital. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. It is expensive. Expensive. The word was a slap. The few coins from the locket were already gone, traded for a small loaf of bread and a sliver of cheese. We had nothing. Less than nothing. The space between them burned with unspoken fear. The healer's pity was a physical thing, a heavy cloak I couldn't bear. She didn't know what scared her more, the sickness consuming her son, or the place she had to go to save him. After the healer left, I sat by Leo's side, watching his small chest struggle for every breath. The world narrowed to this single flickering candle, this single precious life. The boy I loved was a king, a tyrant, a monster. But he was also a father whose resources were as boundless as his cruelty. My past was a ghost I had run from for 8 years. But a mother's love was a beast far more savage than any ghost. Her world tilted. Something inside her shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It hardened into a single sharp point of resolve. And just like that, everything changed. I would not let my son die. I would go back. I would face the Iron King. I would kneel. I would beg. I would bargain with the devil himself. Because my son's life was worth more than my pride, more than my pain, more than my shattered heart. I bundled Leo close, his feverish warmth a small comfort against the terror in my soul, and stepped out into the biting wind, turning my face toward the distant, damning glow of the Capitol. The throne room wasn't just big. It was a cavern of gold and stone designed to make you feel small, insignificant. And it was working. Sunlight streamed through towering stained glass windows, painting the marble floor in jewels of red and blue. But the light didn't bring warmth. The air was cold, smelling of old stone and beeswax, and so silent I could hear the frantic beat of my own heart. Every lord and lady was dressed in silks and velvets, their curious stares feeling like tiny needles on my skin. I clutched Leo's small hand tighter, my worn wool cloak a pathetic shield against their judgment. At the far end of the hall, on a throne that looked forged from shadows and steel, sat the king. He wasn't the boy I remembered, not even close. That boy was gone. In his place was a man carved from granite, his face a mask of bored indifference. His crown was a circlet of jagged black iron, and his eyes were the coldest things I had ever seen. The air thickened around him, heavy with power and a silent, simmering rage that made the wolf in my blood want to curl up and hide. This was the alpha of this kingdom, the Iron King. My turn came. My legs trembled as I walked the long, lonely path to the dais. I kept my head bowed, my voice a mere whisper in the vast hall. Your Majesty, I am a widow. My son and I, we need aid. He didn't even look at me. He waved a dismissive hand. The crown has no charity for strays. Petition denied. The words were a physical blow. Desperation clawed at my throat. But then Leo, weak from our journey, let out a small, dry cough. And that single tiny sound changed everything. The king's head snapped down. His cold, indifferent gaze fell upon my son. For the first time, he truly looked. As the silence stretched, the air grew tight, unbreathable. I saw it, the flicker of confusion, the widening of his eyes, the way his powerful body went rigid, as if struck by lightning. The board mask shattered, and beneath it was a raw, visceral shock that ripped through the entire court. In the span of a breath, he was on his feet. The scrape of the throne on stone echoed like a gunshot. He pointed a trembling finger, not at me, but at the small, innocent boy beside me. His voice was a raw, broken rasp that tore through the silence. Who is this child?
A son. The word was a thunderclap in the silent, cursed prison of my mind. A boy. A child with my eyes. My jawline. The scent of royal blood. My blood. And something else. Something wild and achingly familiar, like a half-remembered song. Wildflowers after a summer rain. My wolf, the beast I kept chained in rage and duty, threw its head back and howled. It clawed at the inside of my skull, a frantic, desperate scrabbling. Mate. Pup. Ours. OURS. But the curse was a serpent, coiling tighter. It hissed venomous lies into the cracks of my confusion. A trick, a deception. She abandoned you. She left you to rot. Remember the betrayal. The anger was a welcome shield against the agonizing pain of not knowing, of a memory that was a gaping, bleeding wound. I stormed into the lavish suite where they had been taken. My guards stood outside. A clear message. You are mine now. You are my property. The woman, Elara, my mind screamed her name even as I fought it, stood protectively in front of the boy. Her scent filled the room, and it was pure agony. It was home, and it was poison. Tell me who he is. The command ripped from my throat, the voice of an alpha king, a sound that made stone tremble. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to pull her into my arms. The contradiction was tearing me apart.
His rage was a physical force, a wall of heat and power that filled the room. This was what I had expected. This was the monster I had prepared for, and I would not let him see my fear. "He is my son," I shot back, my voice shaking but defiant. "Our son!" he roared, taking a step closer. His golden wolf eyes blazed, not with the warmth I remembered, but with a possessive, predatory fire. "You hid him from me. For 8 years, you kept my heir, my son, from me." The injustice of it all gave me strength. "You kept him from you. You cast me aside. You chose a political bride, a crown. You left me with nothing." He stopped, his face a mask of genuine, tortured confusion. "I left you? You vanished, Elara. One day you were there and the next, gone. No note, no word. I searched, I thought you were dead." Was he insane? The lie was so audacious, so complete it stole my breath. This was his story? That I had been the one to leave? No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't see a flicker of deceit in his eyes, only a deep, tormented conviction. "You lie?" I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You sent me away. Your mother—" "My mother is dead," he snarled, "and she has nothing to do with this. You ran away from me. You chose a simple life with some carpenter, and you hid my son." The space between them burned with 8 years of pain, 2 different stories colliding with no hope of reconciliation. Deep down, she knew the truth. Or she thought she did. But the man before her, a king drowning in his own fury, believed his lie with every fiber of his being. And that was more terrifying than any simple hatred. He wasn't just a monster. He was a broken one. I was a prisoner, a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. The royal physicians tended to Leo, their skilled hands and magical tinctures doing more in an hour than our village healer could in a week. He was safe, for now. Which meant I had time to be terrified. The king, Theron, did not return. But someone else did. He moved with the silent grace of a panther, his clothes impeccably tailored, his smile a work of art. But his eyes were ancient and cold. I recognized him from the court, Lord Valerius, the brother of the king's late wife. "A tragedy, your recent loss," he began, his voice smooth as honey. "And now to be thrust into this difficult situation. The court is buzzing." I said nothing. My instincts screamed that this man was more dangerous than a snarling wolf. "The king is passionate," he continued, circling the room, trailing a finger over a silk tapestry. "His grief has made him unpredictable. A strong, pure bloodline is all that keeps a kingdom stable. My sister, the late queen, understood that. Her son, my nephew. He is a boy of impeccable lineage." He stopped and looked at me, his smile never wavering. "It would be a tragedy if anything were to complicate that." The threat was clear. It wasn't a punch. It was a needle dipped in poison, slid expertly between my ribs. Before either could speak again, a servant bustled in, carrying a tray. With a clumsy apology, she tripped, sending a pitcher of water cascading across the floor, splashing near Leo's temporary bedside. "My apologies, my lady," she cried, quickly sopping up the mess. But I saw it. In that moment, as the water pooled on the dark wood, I saw that same oily shimmer I had seen in Leo's cup in our cottage. A faint, unnatural ripple, a whisper of something wrong. As if pulled by a string, my gaze shot to Lord Valerius. He was watching the servant, and for a split second, his perfect smile tightened. It was a flicker of satisfaction. Without warning, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty castle swept over me. I had come here fearing a king. I had come here fearing a ghost from my past. But I was wrong. The real monsters in this castle were the ones who were still alive, and they had been hunting my son long before we ever set foot inside these walls. The knock on the door was sharp, imperious. My heart leaped into my throat, and I instinctively moved to stand in front of Leo. I expected guards, or worse, Lord Valerius. But then the door opened, and it was the king. He wasn't raging, not this time. Instead, he seemed awkward, out of place. In his large, powerful hands, he held a small, intricately carved set of wooden soldiers. His eyes flickered toward Leo, avoiding mine. "For the boy," he said, his voice a low rumble. He placed the soldiers on a small table. "I had a set like this when I was his age." Leo, who had been sitting quietly, looked at the toys, his eyes wide. Then he looked at the formidable man who offered them. Theron knelt, a movement that seemed to cost him a great deal of effort. It was the posture of a king trying to be a father and failing. "A king must know how to command his men," he said, his tone more suited for a general than a 7-year-old. I watched them, my heart a painful knot in my chest. This was a side of him I hadn't expected, a clumsy, yearning tenderness hidden beneath layers of iron and ice. Soon after, Leo was distracted by his new toys, leaving me alone with the king. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. "The carpenter," he finally said, not looking at me. "Did he make you happy?" The question was a raw nerve. "He was kind," I said, my voice tight. "He gave us a home. He kept us safe." "From you," I left unsaid. "Kindness doesn't keep a kingdom strong," he muttered, his jaw tight. Her voice trembled, but she met his gaze. "And what does, Your Majesty? Fear? Cruelty? Is that what makes a king strong?" As the words left her lips, I saw that flicker of pain again, the deep, tormented confusion. It was as if my words were stones thrown at a man who was already drowning.
Her words were daggers, each one a fresh cut on a wound that would not heal. Cruelty. She thought him cruel. Maybe he was. The curse had hollowed him out, leaving only rage and duty behind. He looked at her, at the defiant tilt of her chin and the fear she tried so hard to hide in her eyes. The wolf inside him didn't know whether to tear her apart or fall at her feet. Ours. Mate. Fix this. But how? How could he fix a past he couldn't properly remember? He remembered her scent. He remembered the agony of her absence. But the moments in between were a fog, a nightmare landscape painted by his mother's dying curse. All he knew was that she stood here now, judging him, hating him, and she had every right to. Because of that, the only thing that came out of his mouth was cold command. "You will remain here. You and the boy. You will be provided for. You will be protected." He turned and left before the agony in his own soul could swallow him whole. He was protecting them. That's what he told himself. But as the door clicked shut behind him, he knew the truth. He was a king, and he had just locked up his entire world.
Life in the gilded cage began. Ladies-in-waiting were assigned to me. Most were like porcelain dolls, their faces pretty and blank, their eyes full of calculating curiosity. But one was different. Anya. She was plain, quiet, and seemed to go unnoticed by the others. One afternoon, while she was helping me with my hair, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "The Valtos family has deep roots in this palace, my lady. The late queen's people. Their loyalty is to her bloodline, and only her bloodline." It was a warning, and a gift. From there, I started to watch, to listen. Anya's quiet hints were my guide. I learned to see the invisible lines of power in the court. I saw how the nobles loyal to House Valtos would subtly turn their backs when I entered a room. I heard the whispers that followed me. The Omega, the homewrecker, the woman who had bewitched the king. One day, while walking through the gardens, I overheard two noblewomen talking. "The king's headaches are worse than ever," one said, fanning herself. "He's never been the same since Queen Isolda's death," the other replied. "So much anger. It's as if his wolf is constantly at war with itself." A war with itself. The word sent a chill down my spine. It was another piece of the puzzle, another hint that Theron's cruelty wasn't simple. It was an affliction. Something was fundamentally wrong. That night, my fears took on a terrifying new form. I was jolted from a light sleep by a scream. Leo. I rushed to his bed. He was thrashing, his eyes wide with terror, but seeing nothing in the room. "No," he cried, his small hands batting at the air. "The shadows, the cold hands, get them away." My blood ran cold. The shadows with cold hands. I held him tight, rocking him, murmuring soothing words until his trembling subsided and he fell back into a fitful sleep. But I did not sleep. I sat by his bed, my eyes scanning every dark corner of the room. The shimmer in the water, the whispers of the king's madness, the veiled threats of Lord Valerius. And now, my son's nightmares. These were not separate things. They were threads of the same dark web, and my son and I were caught right in the center. The candle flickered, casting long dancing shadows across the room. Leo whimpered in his sleep beside me, still troubled by the nightmare. My own eyes burned with exhaustion, but I refused to close them. I would watch over him. I would be his shield. And then I saw it. Her breath caught. A thin, dark mist, oily and unnatural, was seeping from beneath the heavy oak door. It wasn't smoke. It moved with a purpose. It slithered, low to the ground, a predator made of shadow and malice. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know what scared her more, the mist itself, or the terrifying, silent way it moved toward her son's bed. Her thoughts spun. The shimmer in the water, the cold hands. This was it. This was the source of his terror. For a second, I was frozen, a rabbit in the path of a snake. But then my gaze fell upon the nightstand. A heavy, ornate candlestick made of solid silver gleamed in the low light. An old village tale, a story my grandmother used to tell, surfaced from the depths of my memory. Silver is pure. It burns away darkness. It repels evil. Her body moved on instinct. Without thinking, I snatched the heavy candlestick. It felt cold and solid in my trembling hand. I scrambled from my chair and placed myself between the creeping mist and my son. As the tendrils of shadow reached for the bed, I thrust the silver base of the candlestick into its path. The effect was immediate and violent. The mist recoiled with a soundless scream, a shriek that echoed only in my soul. Where the silver touched it, the shadow sizzled and dissolved like smoke in the wind. A faint, acrid smell like burnt ozone and decay filled the air. The mist writhed, pulling back from the pure metal as if burned by holy fire. With a final, hateful hiss, it receded, flowing back under the door and vanishing. I stood there, panting, my knuckles white as I clutched the candlestick. It worked. Oh, fates. It worked. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just a victim. I could fight this. In that moment, the door burst open. The king stood there, his face a thundercloud of anger and confusion. He had clearly been roused by some noise I hadn't even registered. His furious gaze took in the scene, me, standing wild-eyed, brandishing a candlestick like a sword over our sleeping son. His voice was a dangerous roar that shattered the quiet. What, in the name of all the gods, is this madness? It was magic! The words tumbled out of me, frantic and breathless. A dark mist. The silver candlestick drove it away. Theron, you have to believe me. He stared at me, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. For a single fleeting heartbeat, I saw a flicker of doubt in his golden eyes. He saw my terror, and he knew it was real. But then the curse, like a veil of smoke, dropped back over his features, twisting his concern into cold, hard anger. "Enough of this madness," he bit out, his voice dangerously low. "You are overwrought. The stress of your arrival has clearly unbalanced you." "No, it's this castle. It's someone in this court," I insisted, desperation making my voice high and thin. "They are trying to hurt Leo." Without another word, he turned to the guards at the door. "Move them to the Queen's Western Suite. Double the guard. No one is to enter or leave without my express permission." He looked back at me, his expression unreadable. "You will be protected, and you will not frighten the boy with these fantasies again." He was imprisoning us. He called it protection, but it was a cage. A softer, more luxurious cage, but a cage all the same. Because of that, a wave of hopelessness washed over me. How could I fight a monster who refused to see the real enemy? As we were being moved, the lady-in-waiting Anya pressed a small leather-bound book into my hand. "Old tales," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously down the hall. "Sometimes there is truth in them."
He watched them go, the scent of her fear and defiance a maddening perfume in the air. His wolf paced restlessly inside him, snarling in confusion. The woman's terror was real. He was an alpha. He could smell truth and lies as easily as he could smell rain on the wind. Her fear was the truth. But magic? A dark mist? It was the ramblings of a panicked Omega, far from her home and out of her depth. That's what the cold, logical part of his mind, the part the curse fed, told him. And he had to believe it. Because if he admitted magic was at play, it meant there was an enemy in his court he could not see. An enemy who had already gotten dangerously close to his son. Just then, Lord Valerius approached, his face a perfect mask of concern. "A wise decision, Your Majesty. The woman is clearly unstable. We cannot have such chaos so close to the throne." He bowed his head. "To that end, and to show the stability of the kingdom, I have taken the liberty of opening talks with the southern lords. A betrothal for my nephew. It would secure our borders and calm the court." The political gears were turning, a move to box him in, to elevate the other heir. Valerius was using Elara's hysteria as a weapon, and Theron, trapped in his own cursed mind, had just handed it to him. He had to control her. He had to quiet this situation. He had to protect his son, even if it meant protecting him from his own mother.
The Queen's Western Suite was beautiful, and it was a prison, gilded bars, but bars nonetheless. That afternoon, Theron was there, a silent, brooding statue near the fireplace, watching Leo play with the wooden soldiers he'd been given. A tense, fragile peace had settled between us. A knock came at the door. A Valtos courtier entered with a gift for Leo. "A small token to welcome the young lord," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a magnificent toy, a wooden horse carved from dark wood, its eyes two polished black stones. Leo was delighted. As he took the horse, I saw Theron's jaw tighten, a flicker of primal, paternal jealousy. He didn't like another male giving his son gifts. Leo set the horse down among his soldiers. For a moment, all was calm. But then, the air grew cold. The polished stone eyes of the wooden horse began to glow with a faint, sickly light. A wisp of the same dark, oily mist I had seen before seeped from its carved nostrils. My blood turned to ice. It was happening again. And Theron was right here. "Leo, get back!" I screamed. The mist poured from the toy, coalescing into a shadowy, claw-like shape. It lunged not at Leo, but straight toward Theron's chest. Her body moved on instinct. Without thinking, I threw myself forward. My only thought was to get between the magic and them. I slammed into Theron, my arms wrapping around his torso as I shoved him back, simultaneously spinning to shield Leo, who was right behind him. My cheek pressed against the hard muscle of his chest. My scent enveloped him. An unguarded act of protection. An Omega, shielding her alpha and her pup with her own body. An act of true affection. The words from Anya's book flashed in my mind. The moment my skin touched his, a blinding flash of silver-white light erupted from my body. From us. It slammed into the shadow claw, vaporizing it with an unholy shriek. The room fell silent. I looked up, still pressed against him. The anger in his eyes was gone. The confusion was gone. for the first time in 8 years, he was there. The real Theron. His golden eyes were wide with a clarity that was terrifying and an agony that shattered my soul. His voice was a broken whisper, a sound of dawning horror and impossible truth. "You didn't leave me," he choked out, his hands coming up to grip my arms. His gaze was locked on mine, seeing me, truly seeing me for the first time. She did this. She took you from me." And then, his eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed, a terrible guttural scream tearing from his throat as the curse, broken for only a second, slammed back into place with the force of a tidal wave. Chaos erupted. Guards burst into the room. Physicians were summoned. Theron lay on the floor, unconscious, his body rigid with pain. The cursed toy horse lay in pieces, a scorched husk of wood. I was shoved aside, my mind reeling, my heart hammering with the terrible, beautiful, world-shattering truth. He didn't betray me. He was cursed. It wasn't his choice. It wasn't his fault. It was a lie. All of it. Lord Valerius swept into the room, his face a mask of masterful concern. He took one look at the unconscious king, at me, at the broken toy, and immediately took command. "The king has collapsed," he announced to the court officials gathering at the door. His grief, it has finally overwhelmed him. His cold eyes slid to me. "Her presence here has clearly caused him a great and terrible strain. He must be protected from all agitation." He was twisting it. He was using what he saw to build his own narrative. That I, not some dark magic, was the reason for the king's collapse. Physicians carried Theron to his chambers. Valerius turned to the royal council members present. "For the good of the kingdom," he said, his voice resonating with false authority, "we must ensure stability. I will act as Lord Regent until His Majesty recovers from this tragic episode." They were nodding. They were believing him. I stood there, invisible. I held the truth in my hands, a truth that could save the man I now knew I still loved. But it was a truth no one would believe. My word against that of the most powerful lord in the court. My goal, my entire world, shifted in that instant. I no longer needed to survive this court. I no longer needed to escape. I needed to burn it to the ground. I had to save him. I had to find proof. I had to destroy the ones who had done this to him, to us. The fear was gone, burned away by a cold, pure rage. Later, amidst the quiet chaos, Anya found me. She saw the new, hard light in my eyes. She saw the terror had been replaced by something far more dangerous. Purpose. She leaned in close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. The late Queen Isolde was a collector of rare things, dark things. She kept them in a private scriptorium, magically sealed, hidden behind the walls of her old chambers. Anya's eyes met mine, a silent understanding passing between us. A dangerous alliance was forged. "If there is proof of what she did," she said, her voice barely audible, "if there is a record of the curse, it will be in there." The night was a cloak of secrets. The only light in my new lavish prison was a single candle flame dancing between me and Anya. Its light flickered in her wide, fearful eyes. "It is magically sealed," she whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. "No one has entered the scriptorium since the Queen's death." "But you know a way," I stated. It wasn't a question. I could see it in the set of her jaw. She was terrified, but she was loyal to the memory of the true Theron. Her body moved on instinct. She nodded once. "There are old ways, passages known only to the servants, and the seal. The old tales say a blood lock can only be undone by a key of the same blood, or by a power that opposes it." My heart skipped. An act of true affection. My omega nature, my bond to Theron and our son. It was a power that opposed the late Queen's hateful magic. Maybe it was fate that I was the only one who could open that door. What followed was a terrifying journey through the guts of the castle. We moved through dusty, forgotten servants' passages, the air thick with the smell of stone and stillness. Every creak of a floorboard, every rustle of a rat in the walls sent a jolt of pure fear through me. We arrived at a blank wall deep in the late queen's abandoned wing. Anya pressed a loose stone, and a section of the wall ground open, revealing a heavy iron door inscribed with glowing, malevolent runes. The air hummed with dark energy. With every heartbeat, my fear grew, but my resolve hardened. Anya gave me a small, encouraging nod. I took a deep breath, placing my hand on the cold iron. I didn't think about the magic. Instead, I thought of Theron's face in that brief, lucid moment. I thought of Leo's trusting eyes. I poured all of my love, all of my fierce, protective Omega instinct into my touch. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the runes flared with a violent, angry light. The magic fought me, a wave of cold hatred washing over me. But my own power, the simple, pure power of a fated mate and a mother, pushed back. With a final, resentful groan, the lock clicked open. The room inside was a tomb of secrets. Books bound in leather and human skin lined the walls. But one, resting on a black marble pedestal, called to me. It was her grimoire. My fingers trembled as I opened it. And there it was, a chapter titled The Shadowed Crown. It detailed the curse in elegant, cruel script, the ingredients, the incantation, and the anchor, a physical object given in feigned love that would bind Theron's wolf and poison his memories forever. We had it. We had the proof. But then, we heard them. Footsteps. The heavy tread of guards approaching down the corridor. Fast.
The hairpin glinted on the dusty floor, a small silver bird in a tomb of darkness. He recognized it instantly. He had seen it in the Omega's hair. A gift from that mousy little serving girl, Anya. A slow, profoundly satisfied smile spread across Lord Valerius's lips. The fool. The sentimental, idiotic fool. She had done the work for him. He didn't touch the pin. Instead, he called for the captain of his household guard. Secure the area. No one enters or leaves. It seems we have found the source of the king's malady. His plan had been to slowly poison the court against her, to frame her for some minor treason. But this was a gift from the fates themselves. It was so much better. He strode into the royal council chamber, his face a mask of grave urgency. Theron was still unconscious, which made this all the more perfect. "My lords," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "A terrible discovery has been made." He laid it out masterfully. The Omega, a witch of common blood, had used her feminine wiles to get close to the grieving king. She had broken into the sacred sealed chambers of the late beloved Queen Isolde. She had performed dark magic, a ritual of envy and hatred which had struck down their noble king. And here, he had a guard present. The hairpin on a velvet cushion was the proof. Her hairpin, dropped at the scene of her crime. It was a lie woven from a single thread of truth. And it was beautiful. He could see them believing it. Because of that, their fear of the unknown, their suspicion of the Omega outsider, was stronger than any logic. He had won.
The door to my suite slammed open. It was not Theron. It was the Valtos household guard, their faces hard and merciless. "Elara of Oakhaven," the captain barked. "By order of the Lord Regent, you are under arrest for high treason and the practice of forbidden witchcraft." I stared at them, the grimoire clutched to my chest, hidden beneath my cloak. "What? No, it's a lie." But they weren't listening. They seized me, their armored hands rough on my arms. I fought, a wild, desperate strength born of terror for my son. "Leo, where is my son?" I screamed, but they dragged me from the room, from my child, my cries echoing down the empty hall. They threw me into the dungeons. The darkness was absolute, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and despair. The heavy door boomed shut, the sound of the bolt sliding home a sentence of death. I collapsed onto the filthy straw, sobs tearing from my throat. I had failed. I had the proof, but I was caught. And Leo was alone with them. "It is not a pleasant sound, is it?" A voice rasped from the darkness of the cell. "The sound of your world ending." I scrambled back, my heart seizing. I was not alone. A figure shifted in the shadows, a man, broad and powerful, with eyes that seemed to gleam in the pitch black. "Do not be afraid of me, my lady," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "My enemy is the same as yours. I was the king's first captain, and I made the mistake of telling him I did not trust his new queen 8 years ago. Pain. That was the first thing. A roaring fire in his skull, a war behind his eyes. He surfaced from the darkness of his collapse with a gasp, the scent of antiseptic herbs and fear thick in the air. The curse was still there, a coiling serpent of rage and shadow in his soul, but it was damaged, wounded, and through the cracks in its hold, memories flickered. Not the false ones, the real ones. A flash of silver light. Her face, pressed against his chest, eyes wide with terror. Not for herself, but for him. Her voice, a broken whisper. "She took you from me." He sat bolt upright, the movement sending a fresh wave of agony through his head. "Elara." The name was a prayer on his lips. Leo. He needed to see them. Now. The alpha in him, the father, the king, demanded it with a force that made the very stones of the castle seem to tremble. He roared their names. Moments later, the door opened. It was Valerius. His face was a mask of perfect, profound sorrow. It was the face of a man delivering a death sentence. "Your Majesty," Valerius said, his voice soft with feigned pity. "You are awake. Thank the fates." "Where are they?" Theron demanded, his voice raw. "Where is Elara? Where is my son?" Valerius's expression crumpled. He took a step forward. "Theron, my king. The council has made a terrible discovery. The Omega, she was a witch. She used dark magic to strike you down." The words were poison. Theron could feel the curse drinking them in, feeding on the lie, trying to cement his hatred. But the flicker of truth, that moment of clarity, fought back. "Liar," Theron growled. Valerius looked away as if pained to continue. The evidence was undeniable. She was tried for high treason this morning. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air, a final, venomous strike. The sentence was carried out, at dawn. At dawn. The words did not bring the rage Valerius expected. The curse, which fed on anger and grief, was overwhelmed. The agony was too pure, too absolute to be twisted. The world went silent. The roaring in his head stopped. The fire turned to ice. He looked at the man who had been his brother by law, the man who had served him for 8 years, and in the frozen, silent wasteland of his soul, a single thought took root, clear and hard as a diamond. He is lying to me. The antagonist had just made his final, fatal mistake. He had given the king something to fight for. Vengeance.
Power was a taste. A fine, aged wine that coated the tongue and warmed the soul. From the king's balcony, the capital city spread out below him, a jewel in his hand. Theron was broken, confined to his rooms, a beast trapped in the prison of his own mind. The Omega Witch was in the dungeon, awaiting a traitor's death. Everything was settled. Almost. There was one last small detail. A loose thread in his perfect tapestry. The boy. He found him in the royal nursery, a small, sad figure surrounded by toys he wouldn't touch. The child looked up as he entered, his eyes wide and fearful. They were Theron's eyes. It was a flaw Valerius intended to correct. Permanently. "Hello, Leo," Valerius said, his voice a silken caress. "You look lonely." The boy shrank back. Good. Fear was a useful tool. "Your mother," Valerius began, crouching down, his face a mask of sorrow. "She had to go away. But I know she would want you to be brave." He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. His rings were cold against the child's skin. I am going to take you somewhere special, a place where you can see all the stars in the sky. Would you like that? A fall from the observatory tower. So tragic. The poor, motherless boy wandering in his grief took a terrible misstep. The court would weep, and the Valtos bloodline would be secure. Forever. The man's smile was like a crack in a frozen pond. It didn't look real. He smelled strange, like flowers that had been left in a vase for too long. He said Mama was gone. A cold rock settled in Leo's tummy. He wanted his mama. "Where are we going?" Leo asked, his voice a tiny squeak. The man's hand was heavy on his shoulder, guiding him out of the room, down a long, dark hallway where the tapestries on the wall looked like spooky monsters. "To see the stars, little prince," the man said. His voice was nice, but his eyes were not. They were like the eyes of the wooden horse before it got scary. Cold and shiny and empty. Leo didn't want to see the stars. He wanted his mama. He wanted the nice man who gave him the soldiers, the man whose face looked like his own in the mirror. He tried to pull his arm away, but the man's grip was like iron. "You must be brave," the man whispered, his breath cool against Leo's ear. "It will all be over soon." Deep down, he knew the truth. This was not a game, and this was not a nice man. This was a real monster.
The darkness of the dungeon was a living thing. It pressed in on all sides. I sat on the damp straw, the cool leather of the grimoire a small, secret comfort beneath my cloak. Across from me, the former captain, Garrick, was a hulking shadow. "He is cursed," I whispered, the words seeming to be swallowed by the gloom. I saw the book. It's anchored to him. But I don't know how to break it. Garrick's voice was a low rumble, born from years of command. "I have seen these court-weaved curses before, my lady. The magic of envy and ambition. They are not like the curses of the wild. They are personal." He leaned forward, the darkness hiding his face but not the intensity in his voice. "A curse of the heart and mind, bound by feigned love. Its anchor will be something he holds dear, something he keeps close. A gift, perhaps. Something he would never, ever think to discard. A gift." My mind raced. What had Isolde given him? What did he hold so dear that he wouldn't part with it, even from a wife he didn't love? My heart clenched. I didn't know. I was trapped here, helpless, while the key to his freedom was somewhere out there, on his person, and he didn't even know it. The helplessness was a physical agony, a chain heavier than any the guards could forge.
He paced his chambers like a caged wolf, a real one. The curse was a roaring fire, but the lie Valerius had told him was a bucket of ice water, creating a hissing, agonizing steam that clouded his thoughts. She is gone. Executed. The lie was so immense, it buckled the foundations of the curse. His wolf, his true self, refused to believe it. It clawed for purchase, for a memory, for anything real. A gift given in feigned love. Where had he heard that? Was it a wisp of Elara's real memory or another trick? He thought of his wedding to Isolde, a political maneuver, a cold, loveless affair. But she had given him a gift that day, as was tradition. He looked down at his own hand, at the heavy, ornate signet ring on his finger. Gold and onyx. The crest of the kingdom intertwined with the crest of House Valtos. He never took it off. It was the symbol of his office, his duty. And he remembered it now. As she placed it on his finger, she had pricked her thumb on the sharp edge of the onyx setting. A single drop of her blood had smeared on the gold. "A blood bond," she had whispered with a smile, "to seal our union. A gift, given in feigned love, stained with her blood. Something he held dear, not for her, but for the duty it represented. Something he never took off. The anchor. With a roar of fury and dawning horror, he gripped the ring.
The groan of the dungeon door was the sound of finality. 2 Valtos guards stood there, their faces impassive stone. "It is time," one of them said. My blood ran cold. Garrick rose to his feet with a low growl, but he was one man, and they were armed. "My lady," he began, his voice full of helpless fury. "It's all right, Garrick," I whispered. A strange, bleak calm settled over me. I had fought. I had tried. And I had failed. My only thought was of Leo. Live, my sweet boy. Just live. They dragged me from the cell, up winding stone stairs, and into a small private courtyard walled in on all sides. A single wooden block stood in the center. The air was cold. The sky was a heartless, gray slate. I saw him then. Lord Valerius, watching from a high balcony, a cup of wine in his hand, a silhouette of pure triumph. Our eyes met across the distance. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The guards forced me to my knees before the block. The cold stone bit into my skin. This was it. The end of my story. I closed my eyes, and all I could see was Leo's face, his smile, his sky-blue eyes. "I'm sorry, I couldn't save you." The executioner stepped forward, the shadow of his axe falling over me.
He had to get it off. The ring, the anchor, the source of his 8-year-long nightmare. He stood in the throne room, having shattered the door to his chambers, a king possessed. He pulled at the ring. It wouldn't budge. He twisted it. It felt fused to his very bone. He roared in frustration, a sound that was more beast than man. The curse knew what he was trying to do. It fought back with everything it had. Bolts of pure white-hot agony shot up his arm, into his skull. His vision swam. The magic was protecting itself, using his own body as a shield. It was willing to kill him to survive. He fell to his knees, his body convulsing, the pain unbearable. He was losing. The darkness was closing in, the curse laughing at his futile effort. He could hear its whispers again, telling him he was weak, that he had lost her, lost everything. He screamed, a long, final, agonized sound of utter failure, collapsing onto the cold stone floor as the curse overwhelmed him. At the same moment, in a cold courtyard across the castle, the executioner's axe began its descent. All was lost.
The world narrowed to the whistle of the axe through the cold air. This was it. A single sharp breath before the end. Clang! The sound wasn't the sickening thud I expected. It was the sharp, beautiful shriek of steel hitting steel. My eyes flew open. Chaos. The executioner stumbled back, his axe knocked from his hands. The courtyard gates were wide open, and through them poured a handful of royal guards, their armor gleaming. They fought with a desperate fury, led by the hulking form of Garrick, the captain from the dungeon. In the ensuing madness, Anya, her face pale with terror and courage, grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the block. "We had to try," she cried over the din of battle. Hope. It was a shocking, painful, brilliant thing, flooding my system like lightning. I looked across the courtyard, my gaze searching, praying.
The distant sound of fighting, the faint cry of a horn, was a spark in the overwhelming darkness of his pain. A fight. Somewhere in his castle, someone was still fighting. For him, for her. The thought was a bolt of pure adrenaline. He would not die here, on his knees, a puppet whose strings had finally snapped. His love for her, his rage at the injustice, his primal need to protect his son, it all coalesced into one final explosive surge of will. With a roar that was the true king, the true alpha, finally breaking free, he scrambled to his feet. He ignored the agony. He ignored the curse's whispers. He looked at the throne, the symbol of his stolen life, and at the ring, the anchor of his prison, and he chose his own breaking. He slammed his hand, his ring, against the sharp, carved granite arm of the throne. Bone crunched. Pain, white and absolute, exploded up his arm. The ring, unable to withstand the force, shattered. And the curse, its anchor destroyed, shrieked. It was a psychic, silent scream that ripped through his mind, tearing away 8 years of shadow, poison, and lies. He staggered back, gasping, his mind suddenly, painfully, his own. The fog was gone. The anger was gone. All that remained was the truth, and the searing, immediate, all-consuming thought, Leo. He burst from the throne room, his broken hand forgotten, following the sounds of battle. He saw the courtyard, the Valtos guards falling back, and he saw her, Elara, alive, standing in the middle of the beautiful, wonderful chaos. Her eyes found his. In that single glance across the courtyard, 8 years of pain and misunderstanding vanished. All that was left was a promise. He turned to Garrick, who was rallying the loyalists. His voice was no longer a growl or a roar. It was the clear, cold, sharp-edged voice of a king. "Valerius has my son," he said. "We are getting him back now. We're getting him."
We were a tiny, desperate island of loyalists in a sea of traitors. The fighting in the courtyard had died down, the remaining Valtos guards having fled to raise a larger alarm. We had moments. That was all. "He will have taken him to the regent's chambers," Garrick growled, wiping blood from his brow. "It's on the other side of the palace. We'll be cut down before we get halfway there." Theron's gaze was sharp, his mind clearly working, assessing, commanding. He was every inch the king he was born to be. "We need a path that isn't on the maps." My heart pounded. This was my moment. This was my purpose. "I have one," I said, my voice clear and steady. All eyes turned to me. I pulled the hidden grimoire from my cloak. The Queen's own book. It doesn't just hold her curses. It holds her secrets. I've seen the maps. There are passages. One leads directly behind the old council chambers, the ones Valerius has claimed. Theron's eyes locked on mine, and in them I saw not just love, but respect. Awe. I was no longer a victim to be saved. I was his partner, his queen. "Show us," he said simply. The decision was made in an instant. There was no time for doubt. Anya stayed behind to tend to the wounded, a brave, silent promise to hold this small patch of ground for as long as she could. The rest of us, me, Theron, Garrick, and 2 loyal guards, slipped through a hidden door behind a tapestry. We plunged into the darkness of the castle's hidden veins. The air was stale, thick with the dust of ages. Our footsteps were soft echoes in the suffocating silence. We were a ghost army, moving through the heart of our own home to reclaim it from the monster who had stolen it. Every step was a risk. Every shadow could hold an enemy. But for the first time, we were not running. We were hunting. The passage was narrow and dark, our only light a single small lamp held by Garrick. I could feel the immense, solid weight of the castle all around us. In the suffocating silence, the only sounds were our soft footsteps and our own ragged breathing. The tension was a living thing. A wire pulled taut. As we moved through the oppressive dark, a hand found mine. It was warm, strong, Theron's. He didn't say a word, just squeezed my fingers, a silent message of reassurance, of presence. I am here. We are together. The simple touch undid me more than all the terror had. Tears I hadn't realized I'd been holding back pricked at my eyes.
He could feel her trembling beside him in the dark. He could smell the salt of her unshed tears, the fierce scent of her courage, the wildflower fragrance of her soul that he had missed for 8 agonizing years. His heart, his real heart, ached for her. He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear, his voice a low whisper meant only for her. "He will pay for every tear," he murmured, his voice raw with a promise that was more sacred than any vow to a kingdom. "He will pay for every second of your fear, for every lonely night." He stopped, turning her to face him in the near darkness. He could just make out the shape of her face, the gleam of her eyes. "I am sorry, Elara," he breathed, the words torn from the deepest part of him. "Not for the curse, that was his evil. I am sorry for the day you returned, and for even 1 second I doubted you. I am sorry for every harsh word, for every moment I made you feel like a prisoner." A tear finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "Theron, I never stopped loving you," he whispered, "even when I couldn't remember why. My soul knew. It remembered you. She raised a hand to his face, her touch gentle. You don't have to earn anything back, she said, her voice full of a strength that humbled him. You just have to come home. And in the darkness, that was it. Forgiveness. A new beginning. Garrick held up a hand. We're here. At the end of the passage was a small iron grate. Theron peered through. He could see the regent's chambers lit by a roaring fire. He saw Lord Valerius, his back to them, and he saw Leo struggling in his grip. Valerius held a small, dark vial to their son's lips. Time stood still. The quiet moment was over. The final battle was here. Through the grate he saw it, the glint of a glass vial, the dark liquid inside, and Valerius's hand, forcing it toward his son's lips. Time shattered. There was no thought, no plan, only a roar of pure, primal rage that ripped from the depths of his soul. With Garrick at his side, he burst through the secret door, splintering the ancient wood. Valerius spun around, his eyes wide with shock, but his composure was chilling. In one fluid motion, he yanked Leo back against his chest, using the boy as a shield. The open vial of poison was pressed to Leo's mouth. One more step, Your Majesty, Valerius hissed, his silken voice now laced with venom. And your precious bloodline ends right here. So tragic. So avoidable. Garrick froze, his sword half raised. The two guards behind him tensed. A standoff. My son, my terrified, whimpering son, was a pawn in the final move of the game. My wolf snarled, wanting to lunge, to rip and tear, but the sight of that poison paralyzed me. Valerius smiled, a cruel, triumphant smirk. He had me, he knew it, but he had forgotten about the queen.
The moment their eyes locked, I knew Theron was trapped. His love for our son had become his cage, but I was not a king. I was not a warrior. I was a mother. And my love was not a cage. It was a weapon. My eyes darted around the room that had been my prison. I knew its layout. I knew its weaknesses. My gaze landed on a towering suit of decorative armor, ancient and heavy, standing precariously on a pedestal near the wall. As if fate demanded it, my body moved. While Valerius was distracted by his monologue, gloating at the frozen king, I launched myself sideways. I didn't make a sound. I slammed my entire body weight into the pedestal. The sound was glorious. A deafening crash as the full suit of steel-plate armor toppled over, hitting the marble floor with the sound of a thunderclap. For a single vital second, Valerius's head jerked toward the noise, his grip on Leo faltering. It was the only opening Theron needed. He moved like a blur of shadow and fury. Not a wild beast, but a disciplined storm. He didn't aim for Valerius. He aimed for his hand. A sharp, precise strike knocked the vial away. It shattered on the floor, the dark liquid hissing like a snake. In the same motion, he hooked an arm around Leo, pulling him free. Garrick and his men surged forward, subduing the stunned Valerius. The fight was over before it had truly begun. I rushed forward, gathering Leo into my arms, burying my face in his hair, breathing in the scent of him, the beautiful, wonderful scent of my living child. He was safe. Theron stood over the defeated Valerius. I saw the urge in him, the desire to rip the man's throat out for what he had done. But he didn't. He took a deep, steadying breath, the fury in his eyes banking into cold, hard justice. "Take this traitor to the dungeons," the king commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that no one dared question. "He will face a public trial. The entire kingdom will know what he has done." He turned to me, his golden eyes soft and full of a love that healed every broken piece of my heart. We had won.
The throne room was a sea of stunned, whispering faces. Lords and ladies who had sided with Valerius now looked pale with terror. Those who had been uncertain now looked to him, their new, true king, for guidance. He walked to the throne but did not sit. Instead, he stood before it, Elara a warm, solid presence at his side, Leo clutching her hand. Garrick, his new captain of the guard, stood at the foot of the dais, a symbol of the restored order. For 8 years, Theron began, his voice clear and strong, echoing through the silent hall. This kingdom has been under a shadow. I have been under a shadow. He held up the shattered pieces of the signet ring for all to see. Queen Isolde did not die of a fever. She died weaving a curse of dark and forbidden magic, a curse of blood and betrayal, anchored to this ring, designed to poison my mind and turn me into the tyrant she knew the court would despise. A collective gasp swept through the room. She did this so her own family, House Valtos, could manipulate the throne, he continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, pinning each lord in place. Her brother, Lord Valerius, continued her work. He threatened my son, he imprisoned my mate, and he tried to seize my crown. He then held up the grimoire. But he failed, because truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, will always find its way to the light. And the light has returned to this kingdom. He looked at the trembling members of House Valtos. By royal decree, House Valtos is hereby stripped of its titles, its lands, and its seat on the council. Its members will be tried for high treason. Their conspiracy is at an end. The justice was swift. It was absolute. The political poison that had infected his court for nearly a decade was finally decisively cut out. He had reclaimed his throne. He had reclaimed his honor. But there was one last thing to reclaim, the most important thing of all. He took Elara's hand, its warmth a welcome anchor in the shifting tides of his new reality. He looked at her, then at their son, and then out at the waiting court. The past was dead. It was time to build the future.
I stood on the dais, Leo's small hand tucked safely in mine, and watched the man I loved become the king he was always meant to be. The fear and scorn in the eyes of the court had been replaced by awe, by hope. Theron had them stand for hours as he dispensed justice, his voice never wavering. He was wise, he was fair, he was magnificent. My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. When the last of the traitors had been led away, he turned, his attention falling solely on us. The entire court held its breath.
This was the final decree, the one that mattered more than all the others. By the ancient laws of this kingdom and by the magic of the fates themselves, he announced, his voice resonating with deep emotion, my union with Isolde of House Valtos, forged in treason and sealed by a curse, is hereby declared null and void. It never was. He paused, letting the words sink in. I know that for 8 years you have known me as the Iron King. I do not ask you to forget the harshness of my rule. I ask only that you understand it was the product of a shadowed mind. That shadow is gone, and I will spend the rest of my days earning your trust, not with words, but with my actions. He then knelt, bringing himself eye level with his son. And to that end, let the kingdom know, there is only one true heir to this throne. He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. I present to you all, not a bastard, not a secret, but Prince Leo of the royal house, my firstborn, my son and heir. A murmur of shock and wonder went through the crowd. Finally, he stood and turned to Elara. He took both of her hands in his gaze so full of love and adoration it stole her breath. And finally, he said, his voice dropping to an intimate tone that was for her alone, yet heard by all. I had a forgotten vow, a promise made under moonlight to the other half of my soul, my fated mate. As the sky darkened outside, painting the hall in the twilight hues of a new evening, he went down on one knee, not as a king to a subject, but as a man to his whole world. Elara, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. You saved me. You saved us all. You are the heart of this kingdom. You are the heart of me. Will you be my queen? Her chest ached with a joy so profound, tears streamed freely down her face. In the quiet that followed, she gave him the one answer her soul knew how to give. Yes, she whispered. Always yes. As he slid a simple, new, uncursed ring onto her finger, the court erupted. not in polite applause, but in a roar of genuine, heartfelt celebration. He rose, pulling her into a kiss that sealed their past, their present, and all of their tomorrows. He had come home, and he was never leaving again.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So, why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.